So, okay, we're live on YouTube. Good evening, Europe. Good morning, America. Good morning, Dr. Robert Zubrin. I'm glad to have you as a guest speaker in our academic module, Emerging Fields in Architecture from the TU Vienna. Let me shortly introduce you to my students. Dr. Robert Zubrin is an American aerospace engineer and well-known author, and is best known for his advocacy of human exploration of Mars. Robert Zubrin has a BA in Applied Mathematics from the University of Rochester, a Master of Science in Aeronautics and Astronautics, and a Ph.D. in Nuclear Engineering, both from the University of Washington. Robert Zubrin has 26 years industry experience. He has more than 200 technical publications in various areas of astronautical, aerospace, also fossil fuel and nuclear engineering, and 14 US patents. Robert Zubrin is also well known for his books. He's a best-selling author, and he's internationally known as one of the most creative engineers working in industry today. His work has been subject of favorable press coverage. He is a president of the Mars Society, a contributing editor of the new Atlantis, and a senior fellow with the Center for Security Policy. Robert, I'm glad to have you here in our module, Emerging Fields in Architecture. I'm looking forward to your talk on human exploration on Mars, and I'll give you the floor. Thank you very much for coming.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me, especially since I'm not a space architect or an architect. But I do believe I have some appreciation for the field. And so what I'm really going to talk about here is not so much space architecture. I'll talk a little bit about that, but really why the field has now become relevant to a vastly greater degree than ever before. Okay, so, you know, I've written a number of books. My best known book is called The Case for Mars, lays out my Mars plan, and my more recent book is called The Case for Space, How the Revolution in Spaceflight Opens a Future of Unlimited Possibilities. Now, that was published last year, and it's what I'm going to talk about mostly, the revolution in spaceflight and what it portends. Okay, so look, in 2009, newly elected President Obama formed a commission led by Norm Augustine, who was the recently retired chairman and chief executive officer of Lockheed Martin, the biggest aerospace company in the world. And the purpose of this commission was to examine the prior administration, George Bush's plan to go to the moon, to see if it was feasible within practical financial means. And after working for a year or so, they came to the conclusion, their conclusion was it was not possible, it was not within the means of the United States to return to the moon, because developing the necessary heavy lift vehicle would take, according to them, 12 years and $36 billion. And so the plan was abandoned. Now, Elon Musk, however, went off, and he actually spoke to this commission, and he said he could develop it for $2 billion. They dismissed him. And then he went off to develop it and on his own money. And in 2018, about 6 years after he started his program, they flew the Falcon Heavy. And I think many of you may have seen the first flight and the spectacular landing of the Falcon Heavy practically at its launch site. And the program, okay, was done for less than $1 billion. So 1/30 of the cost projected by the Augustine Commission, half the time, and to cap it all, the vehicle is 3/4 reusable. So that what Musk had proven was that it is possible for a well-led entrepreneurial organization to do things at the fraction of the time and cost that had been conceived of as being remotely possible previously, and furthermore, even do things that had been considered impossible by the aerospace establishment. So this has set off an international entrepreneurial space race. There are numerous other entrepreneurial private invested supported launch companies, spacecraft companies, and it is even transferred into other fields outside of space, such as, for instance, fusion energy, where you now have fusion power startups getting serious investment because investors have concluded that perhaps the reason for stagnation in fusion power was that the wrong kind of organization was doing it, that the real problem isn't technological but institutional. So we'll see how that works out, but it's a very promising development. In any case, you now have, I know of at least 5 startups in China that have serious funding behind them that want to be the Chinese SpaceX. And you can be sure that China will make sure that at least one of them succeeds. The ones I've seen have been basically trying to create vehicles on the model of the Falcons with a reusable first stage and expendable upper stage. So Musk, in order to stay ahead, is now working on an even more revolutionary vehicle called Starship, which will be a fully reusable vehicle with an even larger payload capacity than Falcon Heavy, close to that of the Saturn V that took us to the moon. But unlike Saturn V, which was expendable, fully reusable, launch costs on the order of 1% as much. And the Falcons, by the way, after 40 years in which the cost of space launch did not decline at all, from 1970 to 2010, since 2010 have reduced the cost of space launch by a factor of 5. And when we get to fully reusable, the cost will be reduced at least by another factor of 5, if not a significantly larger factor. Because reusable launch vehicles, in addition, okay, they make space flight cheaper. So you're going to have more satellites launched, a lot more. That's basic economics. Well, the more satellites that are launched, the larger the production runs for launch vehicles and all sorts of space technology and spacecraft technology. So you start getting economics of mass production coming into play. And reusable launch vehicles like Starship, for example, could be used for intercontinental travel anywhere to anywhere on Earth in less than an hour. You know, for 3,000 years, people have made money on the Earth's ocean, and some by actually extracting wealth from the ocean, for example, by fishing. But far more money has been extracted, or made rather, not really extracted, but created by using the ocean as a medium of global transport. That's a much bigger business than fishing, many orders of magnitude bigger. And the, well, because the ocean is a fairly global medium that offers low drag movement. Well, space is a global ocean that offers zero drag. And if you can get into space, you can go anywhere to anywhere on Earth in less than an hour. It's a global ocean connecting all points. And admittedly, there's a variety of technical and environmental challenges that need to be met before that kind of transport can become a reality. But from a technical point of view, it becomes reality once you have vehicles like Starship. And the point about this is, last year there was 100 satellites launched, more or less. I mean, 100 satellite launches. The satellite launch is getting cheaper. We'll probably soon see 200 or 300. But there are hundreds of intercontinental flights every hour, not every year, every hour. And so if space flight technology can break into that market, then you're going to see the cost of rocket engines go down to be something like the cost of automobile engines. because a rocket engine actually isn't more complicated than an automobile engine, let alone an automobile. And there's no reason why it should cost 3 orders of magnitude more. And so everything gets cheaper. So now you start saying, well, if we have a true space industry of this sort, then you can start talking about actual settlement of Mars. You know, in my book, The Case for Mars, I made the point that using the kinds of technology we have and the kind of space industry that we have, we could do a human mission to Mars, provided it was done efficiently, take advantage of Martian resources, and so forth, and not include a whole bunch of diversionary technologies just to please various vendors. But if you want to settle Mars, okay, a human mission to Mars can't cost $1 billion. Okay, NASA today would love to do a human mission to Mars for $1 billion. But if you want to send colonists, okay, if you put 100 colonists in a ship, well, all right, if it costs $10 million, that's $100,000 each. All right, that might be the range of costs for immigration to Mars. The technology to enable that is on the way. And, you know, I visited Musk at Boca Chica earlier this year, and he's not building a ship there, he's building a shipyard. He is producing these Starship prototypes now at a rate of 1 a month, and soon it will be much more, because the workforce at Boca Chica a year from now is going to be 10 times what it is now. So they'll be producing these things every few days. And that's his approach. He's building a fleet. And so now it becomes relevant. I mean, see, look, okay, there's always been a field of space architecture, but it's been oriented towards things like, well, how do you make this space capsule a bit more livable? How do you make a space station a bit more livable? Now, those questions are important, but it's a rather limited venue. First of all, you know, there's only been, well, there was the American Skylab space station, and there were several Soviet Salyut space stations, and there was Mir, and now there's the International Space Station. And then it looks like we're going to have a lunar orbiting space station. But this is a pretty, you know, architects outside of the space program compete ideas for building thousands and thousands of different kinds of buildings all over the world. Okay, not for, well, next year the world will build 1 building, and maybe a decade from now we'll build another building. Okay, so, okay, now, of course, early Mars missions, the kind of architecture needed will be this traditional type of space architecture. If you've, you know, seen my Mars Direct plan, you know, I have got a tuna can hab. You know, you've probably seen pictures of the Mars Desert Research Station or the Mars Arctic Research Station, which were designed along the same lines of take an 8-meter diameter cylinder, you know, make it 6 meters high, so you have 2 decks, each with 3 meters of headroom, and then figure out where you're going to put the individual compartments and so forth. Okay, that's functional. That's one kind of architecture, and it's going to be needed for initial Mars missions. You want to make the HABs as livable as possible and as functional as possible, and all that kind of thing. And you have to think, is this a zero gravity HAB, or if you landed on Mars, it's a gravity HAB, and maybe it has to function in both roles at different points in the mission. And these are interesting considerations. But if we're talking about building not an exploration base, which could be built by simply landing a group of such cylindrical HABs close to each other on the surface of Mars, and perhaps linking them up with inflatable tunnels or something. But we're talking about creating settlements, societies. Then we have to transform this. I mean, certainly the the seeds for this will be individual halves land on the surface, fine. But then what do we build? What do we create? How do we create livable extraterrestrial colonies? The Mars Society recently had a international design contest to design a Martian city-state. Last year, we had them design a 1,000 person Mars settlement. This year, a Mars city-state. We allocated this year only 30 of the 100 points for technical merit. That's still substantial. It has to work. 30 points for its economic foundation, 20 for its political, cultural, social design, and 20 points for its aesthetics. And in space up to this point, aesthetics has very much been in a minor role. But when you think of a settlement, human habitation has to be beautiful. If you want people, you want a settlement, you want people to want to go there. You want it to be a good place to live, okay? And very much part of a good place to live is its visual and spatial characteristics. So, of course, Mars, there's a certain cosmic ray dose that comes in from space. It's not too bad in the short term. If you're willing for an exploration mission, you can just take the dose. It's a minor part of overall mission risk. People who go to Mars are volunteers. They're taking plenty of other risks on that mission. But if we're creating a society there where you're raising children there, and people are not going to be there for just a year, but for their whole lives, so the radiation dose is larger, and also children have a much higher vulnerability to radiation effects than adults because they're growing. Okay, you say, well, we'll put it underground. All right, well, do you really want to live in tunnels? Do you really want to live in lava tubes? Say, well, we'll have to combine it. We will have large underground spaces comparable to indoor shopping malls, but we'll have domes above it, in which there will be, you can walk around pressurized domes, transparent, natural sunlight. You can walk among the trees or among the farms, because we're going to need farms on Mars. And that's another question. Okay. There's a dispute as to whether we will light these farms entirely with artificial light and keep them underground. I do not think that that is wise. If you consider how much power is needed to illuminate a square kilometer of farmland, you will realize that whatever its merit as a form of centrally generated electrical power, sunlight is an excellent source of outdoor lighting in the daytime. And it's fundamental to light. The amount of sunlight that falls on Germany, for example, to generate that artificially would vastly exceed the total electrical capacity of the human race today. And Germany is of course, a fairly minor contributor to the world's agriculture. It certainly could not feed the world. And in fact, that would also, well, in any case. So we're going to have above ground structures, both for aesthetic and functional purposes. And how can they be combined? And how can that be integrated with a system where people might spend a substantial fraction, perhaps 3/4 of their time underground in these indoor shopping mall type regions where they're very well shielded, and only a minority of their time above ground where they have some exposure to cosmic rays and so on. There were also interesting ideas thrown around. I mean, one team, in fact, the winning team was called Nexus Aurora, which is a very international team. It includes people from a variety of European countries and elsewhere. They had HABs, domes in which there was water above the dome, which of course is transparent and which is shielding, and which they were farming fish above the roof of the HABs. And in fact, having pressure of water above the HABs, above the domes, makes the domes bigger, because you don't have to equalize pressure between the interior pressure and the exterior Martian near vacuum. There are ideas of tunneling into ice, ice palaces, if you will, as the basis for architecture. There were ideas of cliffside dwellings, which do have windows fronting horizontally, so you have a view, you have a certain amount of natural sunlight, but in fact, to the extent that radiation can enter from that direction, it has to travel obliquely through the atmosphere and is correspondingly greatly reduced. You know, on Mars, for example, if you look straight up at the zenith, there's only about 16 grams per square centimeter, okay, so equivalent to 16 centimeters of water between you and the sky that way. But there's 65 grams of mass between, averaged over the 2 pi steradians of the sky. So because there's much thicker path for a cosmic ray particle to travel through, it has to come at you through the atmosphere sideways. So you can create the colony on the sides of the cliff and have substantial view of the exterior world, and yet be substantially shielded. So these are other ideas. So this is actually a complex problem. And then, of course, if you get to wanting to colonize asteroids, so you're tunneling into asteroid surface, that's even a more difficult problem. My focus is on Mars. Okay, and of course, then there's the moon as well, where, okay, you don't have this atmosphere, but you do, but you do have this combination of above ground, below ground system to try to create livable HABs. But I'm most concerned about Mars because Mars is the place that has the sufficient variety of materials that humans can transform into resources to support the development of civilizations. I think that the important reason to go into space, I can think of several important reasons. One is for the knowledge, sure. Learn about the universe. There's no better place to do astronomy than space, and we've learned most of what we know about physics actually from astronomy. So the universe is the best lab there is. If we discover life on Mars, and especially if it's fundamentally different than Earth life, we're going to learn something about the fundamentals of biology that we simply don't understand right now, or don't even know that we don't know. Okay, so there's the knowledge. There's survival, sure, by becoming spacefaring, we'll be able to divert asteroids and things. There's simply the social outlook of an outward-looking society, the challenge, if you will, which I think is very healthy. And there's the mindset of as a species, understanding that we are not in competition for scarce resources, but that we create resources through our creativity, that humanity is not a set of nations in a struggle for existence over finite resources. That world outlook is what led to the 2 world wars and threatens us with catastrophe. But to understand that, okay, we're a family of nations, admittedly a disorderly family, but nevertheless, engage in a cooperative endeavor to expand the human horizon. I think that is what is necessary for a positive future. But then what will we actually create in space? We're going to create new societies that will make new contributions to technology and invention, to social thought, to literature, to philosophy, to history. And Mars is the closest planet where I think we can do that. And so I think the challenge of creating not just more livable space bases, okay, that's functional. And, you know, if you get a job in space architecture, that's probably what they'll ask you to do. But and do it, sure. But to create this vision of how we can create new societies. And, you know, one of the things that I found most inspiring about this recent Mars City State Design Contest was people were trying to design a better society. And they had, yes, aesthetic ideas, architectural ideas, and they also had social ideas on how this might be done. And, you know, this is what's needed. We need to envision a positive and unlimited future for humanity. And I think space architecture has a critical role to play in that. So with that, I'll take questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert. Do we have questions? We have a few experts here among the students.
Refugees.
Future refugees, yes. So, Gilles. Okay, Rudi has one question. Or Gilles? Or Meruna? Okay, just go ahead, unmute yourself and ask the question. Alma can't unmute. Can you unmute yourself? Okay, then I have to change that. You should be able to unmute yourselves, but I will do first with Alma, okay? Alma? Does it work?
Yes.
Now? Good.
Yes. I have two questions for now. You said that there's some materials on Mars that we could use. Could you be more specific about that? What kind of materials?
Sure. Okay. First of all, there's water. Okay. Now, yesterday, NASA announced the discovery of water on the moon in 250 parts per million quantities. Okay, which is 2% of 1%. That's drier than anywhere on Earth. On Mars, there are large regions that are 60% water by weight in the soil. And in fact, there are glaciers that have been discovered on Mars as far south as 38 degrees north, glaciers of pure water ice. 38 north is the latitude of Athens. Okay, so we're talking about water being available throughout the mid-latitudes of Mars in very large amounts and in nearly pure form. Okay, there's carbon. Mars has a carbon dioxide atmosphere. Okay, carbon, you know, has been getting a bad reputation these days, but it's fundamental to life. We are carbon-based life forms. We are made of carbon. Everything we eat is made of carbon. Everything we wear is made of carbon. You know, our furniture is made of carbon. And even things like steel are made with the help of carbon. And and of course, not just the fact that steel contains some carbon, but the processes, industrial processes involved in its manufacture, and glass for that matter, all involve carbon. There's basically no carbon on the moon. So there's that. Mars has had a complex geological history. which is important for the creation of mineral ore. You know, since the dawn of civilization, human beings have used copper tools. Copper was the first metal that people employed, even though copper actually geochemically is very rare, very rare. But it was presented itself as something readily useful to ancient Egyptians and other early cultures because there are geological processes that have concentrated it for us into pure ore and in some case actual metal. American Indians used copper tools, and that geology made that possible. Okay, if the Earth was homogeneous, we still wouldn't be using copper today. So Mars has had this complex geological history, water action, volcanism, possibly even biological activities that concentrate mineral ore. And Mars has all the elements of life and all the elements of industry. It has nitrogen too, which is an important element for life, and it's absent on the moon. Basically, all the materials that we use on Earth exist on Mars, which is not true of the moon and the asteroids. Now, we have to make them into resources. There's no such thing, it is very important. There's no such thing as a natural resource. There's only natural raw materials. It is human creativity that turns materials into resources. But that said, the materials have to be there. And they are on Mars. And if we can develop the technologies that do that, and for instance, you know, my own technical work, the Mars Direct Plan, what's fundamental to it is taking Martian materials and turning them into rocket fuel and oxygen for the return flight. And that is also central to Musk's plan as well. But we have to be able to grow food on Mars. And yes, and make ceramics and glasses and metals and plastics and everything that can be made with all of those things. There's significant technological craft that needs to be developed for that, but the raw material is there.
Mm-hmm. Are there some materials on Mars that we don't have in these quantities on Earth, maybe?
Well, I don't know of any material on Mars that we don't have on Earth at all, but there are materials on Mars that are more plentiful than they are on Earth. For example, deuterium, heavy water, is 6 times as common on Mars as it is on Earth.
Okay.
And deuterium is both a material that allows the creation of nuclear reactors that do not use enriched uranium. Canadian nuclear reactors do not use enriched uranium because they use deuterium heavy water moderators. And of course, it's also the fuel for fusion reactors.
Mm-hmm. And the last question, you said that Elon Musk used reusable material with building his spaceships. So I wanted to ask, do you know what he used and how is it reusable?
Well, okay, the Musk plan has a lot of resemblances to my Mars Direct Plan in that it uses methane and oxygen produced on the Martian surface for return flight to Earth. So you take water and carbon dioxide that exist on Mars and you can react them chemically and form methane and oxygen, which is excellent rocket propellant.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Alma. The next question goes to Miruna.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see you.
Yeah, well, I cannot turn on my camera, but oh my God, what an honor. So Sandro conducted a very nice design studio last semester. We had to build or to imagine how to make a base on Mars. And we were confronted with many challenges. First of all, radiation, then how to make the interior function, how to make it compact as possible, how we also looked into shipping and all of these things. And our design, I was partnered with Rudy. He will probably also ask something after me. We focused on the deployment. So we tried to make the structure as light as possible. And it was very funny because you mentioned the fact that in your challenge for building a city on Mars with the Mars Society, there was somebody who made a roof of water. We also included that in our design. But there are so many things to consider for a base on Mars. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think would be the greatest challenge? Because, okay, we will have the infrastructure probably to ship things there, but what would be on site the greatest challenge?
Well, okay. You're trying to create, if we're talking about building a settlement, okay, is that what you're referring to as opposed to a base? A base is different. I mean, you know, McMurdo Sound is a base in Antarctica, and scientists go there and they spend the winter there, and, you know, frankly, it doesn't look very good, but so what? You're going there for a field season and you're roughing it, okay? But it's not what you'd want your city to look like. You know, looks, okay. So if we're talking about a city, okay, it is combining these functional and aesthetic elements, okay? And I mean, the functional element, okay, first and foremost, it has to create a pressurized environment with a temperature within certain boundaries and all of that. But then it also has to provide not perfect, but a fair amount of radiation protection. We basically want to reduce the long-term radiation dose to the people who live in the Mars town by about 1 order of magnitude compared to what they would get living on the surface. So, you know, like anything else, there's compromises to be made there, because sure, you could reduce the dose to 0 by tunneling deep, deep underground and never coming above ground. But who wants to live like that? You know, you can reduce your risk to automobile accidents by never riding in a car. But you know, so everything, any expansion of human activity always involves a certain amount of risk, so fine. But still, we want this to be measured. Now, we want to, well, you're going to build this thing on Mars with a limited labor force that is limited both in numbers and in diversity of skills. That is, any construction project on Earth involves not only all the people that you see working at the project, but hundreds of thousands of other people who are made parts for the building. Okay, and they're scattered all over the world. Okay, you know, if you build a skyscraper in Germany, there's undoubtedly people from almost every country who have contributed some part to it. And this is a good thing, by the way, that this global division of labor that we have right now is of tremendous assistance. You know, in my own company here, I order parts from China and Germany and Nebraska and everywhere. And that's how we're able to do what we can do. Well, on Mars, you're going to have not only smaller numbers of people, so it's you know, there's a lot of unskilled people that take part in a construction project on Earth. Well, we won't have them at all. But in addition, to try to build this with a much smaller industrial infrastructure, smaller in size and smaller in diversity. So, and diversity of skills. You know, all the different specialists that might be needed to create a major building on Earth. You're not going to have most of them. So we're going to want materials that can be created easily out of local raw materials. We're going to want a way to maximize the productivity of labor. And this includes, okay, well, obvious things are labor-saving machinery, but robotics, artificial intelligence that can be used to endow people with extra skills. So, you know, that's how it's going to have to be. And yet the product is going to have to be something that is livable, enjoyable, and beautiful.
Of course, yes. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miruna. Shay, are you ready?
Yes, I am, but I thought Rudy wants to ask a question next.
Okay.
Yes, 1 second. As it seems, can you hear me, guys?
Yes, we
Can
can
you
hear you.
hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
I can't turn on the camera on my phone either. I'm sorry. So I have to do voice only. Mr. Zubrin, it's an honor for me to hear this talk from you. First of all, I want to tell you, I really love your enthusiasm about Mars. I have one question regarding the first habitats, also by SpaceX, but because we haven't seen a lot of details, or I haven't heard a lot of details from Mr. Musk. He has talked like once on Reddit. He wrote some things, but it doesn't seem very clear. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think? Do you think it's not up high in the priority? Do you think there will? What's your take on?
You're talking about SpaceX's actual plans for the Mars city? I think that's not yet developed. Musk is a very focused individual.
Yeah.
And he right now is focusing on the transportation system. That's really what he is doing. He says the transportation system will enable all the rest. Once we have the transportation system, the rest will follow. Now, there's some truth to that. There are other things that I think he would do well to start thinking about at this point, which might not be urban architecture, but certainly the technologies for producing power and propellant on Mars. You know, I've done work with making propellant on Mars, but I and others have done this on a scale which is much smaller than will be needed to support Starship operations. And it's one thing to prove that something can work in a lab, and it's another thing to build an industrial plant based on those principles. So I think there's some development that needs to be done. I think what Musk is thinking, and I think there's a good chance that this will work out, is this, which is that if he gets the Starship flying, then the world's space agencies and the world's leaders will look at this and say, look, here's Starship going to Earth orbit, you know, every 2 weeks, deploying hundreds of satellites. And he talks about going to Mars. Could we go to Mars? And the answer will be yes, but there's some extra things needed. He needs surface nuclear power reactors. He needs Mars spacesuits. He needs Mars vehicles. He needs technologies for making the fuel on Mars. Well, could we provide that? Well, yes, we can. And meet Musk halfway. In other words, what Musk is doing is he's developed the biggest and most formidable challenge in the entire mission plan, which is the transportation system. And he can do that, you see, because that transportation system has commercial value. Its sole use is not humans to Mars. He'll be able to make money with that transportation system. So while he's investing his own money now, there's a payoff to be had. But a Mars spacesuit, or for example, is not an obviously commercial item, and neither are many of these other technologies that I just listed. So really, it should be the role of the space agencies, the governments, to develop such things, and so that we can have a public-private partnership here. And this is how I believe this is going to come out. You know, Musk is very optimistic in his projections. You know, he always says he'll do something next year, and it takes 3 years. But but look what he does get done in 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so all right. There's no one who's accomplishing anywhere near as much, even if he goes a little bit beyond what he actually does. So look, you know, he says he's going to have Starship reaching orbit next year. What if it's 3 years from now? If starships are flying to orbit by 2024, somebody's going to be elected president in 2024. And if this is happening, they're going to look at their advisors and say, can we do this by the end of my second term? Yes. Will it break our budget? No, we can do it within existing space agency budgets if we work with this guy. And so that's how I think it's going to happen. And that's why I think we're going to be on Mars before 2030.
Yeah.
Even though you won't find that date for humans on Mars on any ESA or NASA planning chart.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Hi. I took the same class as Miruna and the rest of us, and my project partner and I thought of building a rover on Mars that brings not only people from A to B, but also cargo that has like you can connect like an inflatable to the rover and bring your cargo from one city to another. And I would like to ask you 2 questions. The first one would be, do you think we should envision a future where numerous people choose to live on Mars as of we need to build multiple cities there? And do you think that we will need a means of transport similar as to what we know here on Earth?
Well, the answer to the first question is unquestionably yes. The Mars is big enough for more than one city. It's big enough for more than one flag. And it's big enough for many ideas on how humans should organize their societies. Now, some of those ideas will be good ideas and some will be bad ideas. And those that are good ideas will prove themselves in action. Those colonies will be successes, and they will attract immigrants and they will grow. And they will become examples for other colonies on Mars and for societies on Earth. Okay, those that are based on bad ideas will fail and they will disappear. Okay, so there's a certain Darwinian process here, if you will. And actually, it's not really Darwinian, it's Lamarckian, because acquired traits are inherited. And in fact, in social evolution, you can inherit traits, that is to say, technologies, social ideas of social organization, not only from your parents, but from entirely different societies. So inventions, positive innovations made anywhere help people everywhere. So yes, so it's a form of evolution, but it's Lamarckian, not Darwinian. And therefore more powerful, actually, than biological evolution. because a positive adaptation in an organism only benefits its own descendants, whereas a positive innovation in society can benefit all other societies. Yes, there will be many different societies on Mars. They will be founded by people with many different ideas of what a society should be. And we will benefit from all their experiences, but particularly from those that come up with better ideas. So that's the one. Now, the other question is transportation systems like the Earth. Well, certainly some. I think, well, wheeled vehicles, ultimately railroads, are certainly possible on Mars. I don't think we're going to need ships on Mars for a while, not until the planet is terraformed. Flying vehicles are possible on Mars. As you know, in fact, NASA is sending a miniature helicopter to Mars on the Perseverance rover, which is going to land in February. So we'll get to see our first flight vehicles on Mars. So that's an electric helicopter, little one. Bigger ones are possible. Mars airplanes are possible. And also rocket flying vehicles are possible. Balloons are also possible on Mars too. But I think more for scientific instruments than for transport. But certainly some of our transportation system. A lot of people want to go to electric cars. So Mars is the only planet right now that all the vehicles are electrically powered. Of course, Curiosity rover is nuclear electric. Because it gets its power from a radioisotope generator. The Opportunity rover is solar powered, solar electric. All right, so, and I think it's possible we'll see novel kinds of transportation systems. I mean, perhaps, you know, if you read H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds, the Martians travel in these systems that are like tripods that can run around with these long spindly legs. Those are actually machines. Those are not Martians. Those are Martian machines. And perhaps in a lower gravity environment, such vehicles might be much more practical than wheeled vehicles. Mm-hmm. Certainly more practical than they are on Earth. Anyway. Okay.
Yeah. If I may, please, I would like to show you an image of what we came up with.
All right.
So I hope you can see my presentation here. So
I see a screen. I see a kind of a rolling thing.
Yes. So that is like our vision of a rover that could be taking people and cargo from A to B. Like you have this middle part, the rover. And you can attach these deployable structures and take persons or people or cargo with you. Maybe I have another. Yeah, that would be the rover in like its initial shape when it's closed. When you only have like one person that moves wants to go from A to B. You have this shaped sphere-shaped rover, which can unfold its wings like this and deploy these structures to take more people or cargo with it.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, that would be our input to it. So do you think in point of from the engineering point of view, that would be like a possible thing to do? Because here we have like these mechanics that we thought of these wings, but they would need to do. They are like, okay, they need to change the height from the ground that the rover is, so it's positioning. So you can move also on uneven ground or things like this little sketch on the side. So, or get into a steady position, you will need to turn these wings like 180 degrees around and go like these tripod things that you mentioned before. So that was like what we came up with.
Well, it's interesting. I'd suggest you get together with some engineering students and see if you can get some of them to build a prototype, test it.
All right. Yeah, it would be nice, actually. All right.
Okay, next
Thank you.
semester we'll see the prototype. Shane.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Thank you for your input,
Let's
Robert.
do this. Yeah, thank you very much.
Milomir, you had a question.
Yeah, so I want to talk and ask your opinion about the role of the space architects. So you've talked about the design contest, where you showed us, or it was visible, how good design can affect the settlements on Mars, so that the parts of it become bigger, so that the project becomes bigger than the parts. And from my understanding as right now, is that the designers and space architects are looking like from outside to the conversation of the role. So I was wondering, how do young creatives get into the conversation themselves, so that it isn't just the question of how do we make it more livable, but going beyond that.
Okay, so first of all, I do want to mention, the Mars Society conference was a teleconference this year. It was viewable all over the world. Over 100,000 people saw one part of it or another. Over 10,000 registered. So we actually held it as a teleconvention. We were forced to because of COVID, but it turned out to be a much bigger convention than we had ever held. But my point with respect to this is that the presentations of the Mars city-state teams are visible on our YouTube channel. So if you want to see what their ideas were, if you go to the Mars Society YouTube channels, you could go to the session which occurred Saturday afternoon, October 17th, in which 10 different teams presented their designs, and many of them presented as part of that their architectural ideas. Okay, now, but you said, okay, so first of all, I would advise that, and also we're going to publish the 10 finalists and the 10 semifinalists. There were 176 teams altogether. So out of them, the top 20, we're going to publish in a book, probably by the end of this year, and you should get it. There's also a book we published of our contest last year called The Mars Colonies, which you can get on Amazon now. But all right, here's the thing. You say, what role is creating visionary designs for Mars cities? What role does this have in the here and now? How can this get into the conversation? A famous British poet, Shelley, once said, "Poets are the legislators of mankind," because the poets create the visions that people then attempt to realize through politics, through invention, and other means. It sets the agenda. The creating the vision determines what happens. Okay, really. People, yes, our immediate actions day to day tend to be driven by economics, but our larger goals are driven by visions of the kinds of societies we want to have and want to live in and want to create. Okay, poetry is not that powerful a cultural medium anymore in most Western countries. Film is. So you might say that visions created in film create an idea of what the future can be like. And of course, right now in science fiction, there's two rather different visions in competition with each other for what the future is going to look like. And one is this rather positive Star Trek vision of humanity expanding, a universe of infinite possibilities and generally a rather positive future, although there's risks, but still positive. And then there's this anti-utopia. You know, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Soylent Green. It's about a future in which we're running out of resources, and so people are literally recycled, so that the food that people eat, Soylent Green, is made of people. I mean, and everything is totally controlled, and so on. And then I guess there's a third vision, which is after the nuclear war and everything is already destroyed. But in terms of the two ones in which there's actually functioning societies, there's this. Now, you know, I think that it's very important for there to be a positive future for this first vision to prevail. And it really is a question of showing it to people, showing it that it is possible. Okay, that it is possible that we can have this expansive, adventuring, free humanity, that this can be realized, that it's not true that there's only so much to go around, because the universe comes with a wide open sky, and and we can do incredible things there. So I think that, you know, I mean, I think your most powerful medium for influencing things is probably through film, frankly. You know, that is the dominant art form in our society. Not poetry, not statues. You know, I mean, there was a time when, you know, an artist could create a sensation with a painting, okay? But now it's film, and it's a very powerful medium. And to, you know, I mean, of course, you can make static art and post it on the internet, and some people will see it. And that's a start, of course, because, but that's how you could potentially get the attention of people who have the budgets to make actual films. And then that this can be part of a portrayal of the human future.
So you're basically saying that by designing the future, you design the present.
That's right. You influence the present. And you know, the great disasters of the 20th century were caused by people who thought that the world's resources were limited, and therefore we were going to have to fight over it sooner or later, and therefore, to one side or the other, it was going to be sooner, it was going to be better than later. And there you go. And that is an outlook that needs to be refuted. And it needs to be refuted sensuously, visually.
Well, thank you. I think the answer was very fruitful.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Other questions?
Other questions of the group? I have a question to Robert Zubrin.
Okay.
Robert, you said a Mars habitat has to be beautiful. What do you mean? What is, because your lecture is in the frame of this module, and the overall topic of the module is tracing the essential. What is most important? What can't you miss? What do you need? And why do you say beautiful? Is this so important for humankind?
Okay, to be clear, no, if you're looking at my design of the Mars direct mission, it's functional, and through an engineer's eyes, perhaps at least to mine, it's beautiful in a certain sense of, in the sense that a falcon is beautiful and that falcon is aerodynamically very well designed. But I'm talking here, and there's certainly some role for space architects in figuring out how to take an 8-meter cylinder and make it into a livable habitation. But when I'm talking about beautiful in this context, I mean beautiful in a much broader sense. In the sense that a city designer might think of beautiful, not in the sense that, you know, an aerospace designer looking for an efficient habitat design. You know, I mean beautiful in the sense that Florence is beautiful. You know, and interestingly, some of the city-state designers that we saw their presentations.
Try to find ways to make it more sustainable. But also, do you think that, you know, going to Mars and
Robert? I think I muted you by accident. I cannot see you anymore. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, just I was saying, I for a settlement, I mean beautiful in the sense that Florence is beautiful. And in the sense that some of the interesting old cities of Europe are beautiful. So, but someone started asking a question. So I think her name was Anna.
Anna? Anna? I think Anna said something. Was it on purpose, Anna?
Hi. Yes, sorry, I don't know, my computer's a bit weird today. Yes, I wanted to ask something, but I didn't want to interrupt you, so yes, I'm sorry. But can I ask my question now, maybe?
Sure.
Yes, thank you. So, you know, I was actually thinking about something you mentioned before. You said that we have, so there are no actual resources, but that humans, through their craftsmanship, take, you know, the raw materials and make resources out of them. So the problem that we face on Earth is that this process is tainted, and we desperately try to find sustainable ways to do that. So, you know, my question would be, do you think we are, as a society, advanced enough, and that we have already found, you know, those, you know, zero waste and sustainable process so that we can apply them on Mars? Because it seems to me that we go there and, you know, somehow the history repeats itself, because, you know, we need the same materials, but I'm not quite sure if the ways we harness them has, advanced enough. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. As I said, I do not believe there's any such thing as natural resources. There's only natural raw materials. And it is human creativity turns materials into resources. Uranium was not a resource until people invented nuclear power. Oil was not a resource until we invented oil drilling and refining and processes and machines that could run on the product. No one in Napoleon's time would have, if they were listing an inventory of the natural resources of a country, would have listed oil as part of it. Aluminum was not a resource until the 20th century. If you go into any real antique store that has things from, say, before 1850, you will not see anything made of aluminum. Nothing. Even though it's the second most common element in the Earth's crust. It was unknown to people 150 years ago. It was just dirt. Land was not a resource until people invented agriculture, and it was just this thing you had to walk over to while you were chasing game. It was just something got in the way. But we learned to turn land into something that would produce food. It is creativity. Right now, deuterium, which is a minor part of water, is not an energy resource, but it could become a terrific energy resource if we develop fusion power. There are vastly, people say we're running out of resources. In fact, there are vastly more resources available to every person on Earth today than there was 100 years ago, or even 60 years ago. Really. So humans do not live, cannot prosper within a defined set of fixed resources. Rather, humans flourish by creating new resources. When people talk about living in harmony with nature, okay? But in fact, it is by not relying on nature that we preserve nature, okay? It is what saved, do you realize in the late 1800s, Europeans and Americans were killing over 100,000 elephants every year to get ivory, to make combs and chess pieces and piano keys and all sorts of things, and which are now made with plastics, billiard balls.
Yes, were necessary.
The oil industry saved the whales. They were being driven to extinction because people wanted whale oil. And obviously, human society today could not exist by hunting wild animals. Wild animals are more natural than domesticated animals. They're more natural than farms. But it's by not living on wild animals that we have preserve at least a substantial fraction of them. But anyway, these are philosophical points. But you see, I don't think that the threat to humanity today is that we're running out of resources. I think the threat is the idea that we're running out of resources. That is the idea that caused the disasters of the 20th century. Okay, you know, Hitler, Germany needs living space. Germany never needed living space. Germany today has much less territory than the Third Reich and a higher standard of living with a larger population, much higher standard of living with a larger population in much less territory. Why? Well, through the advance of science and technology, okay? Through human creativity, accomplished by people of all races and nations. And so, to me, you know, it is the example of showing what human beings can accomplish if we work together to use our creativity to expand the human prospect. That is where the answer is, okay? The answer of how are we going to try to live within limits, I do not think that that leads in a positive direction, because as soon as you assume limits, you make limited resources makes people enemies.
Yes, but isn't it true that at least you can see that there is a certain trend, if you would like to say, that would, you know, people do not, or say they do not need as many things as they needed 50, 100 years ago. So I would say, you know, I'm just, you know, it's just a thought process that if we say, okay, we start, you know, from ground zero and we go to a new, completely new planet, if we can say that, you know, there are some things that we just say we do not need and we don't take them with us, not the essential ones, but there are a lot of things. For example, ivory. No, we didn't need ivory to live.
No,
So
you didn't need ivory at all, but you needed the kinds of things that people were using ivory to make.
So values.
And the, okay, people used to make combs out of ivory. Do you use a comb? Okay, probably do, not made of ivory. Okay, and in addition to the fact, you know, that I mean, well, to take this example of plastics, it makes all these things much cheaper. You can buy a tournament quality chess set for what an average person, an average worker makes in an hour, because it's made of plastic. And yet all the pieces look just fine. And whereas if it was made out of ivory, it would take 6 months' wages, and so forth. So and guess what? We don't have to kill elephants to make it. Now I think there are certain things that we should leave behind on Earth. Okay. I think these things are things like racism, reactionary ideas. You know, in the England of Queen Elizabeth, there was a society of people who they formed it, they called it the New World Society. And they thought that by colonizing America, they could create a new world, and that they would bring all the best and leave all the worst behind. Now, they did not succeed in that. We did not leave all the worst behind, but we left some of the worst behind. We've had religious prejudice in the United States, but we've never had a religious war or even religious persecution of any substance. We have class distinctions, but we've never had blood nobility. All right. So when you make a new start, you have a chance to leave some of the worst baggage behind. I think that is something that we want to think about. If we make a new start on Mars, how much of the worst baggage can we leave behind?
Yes, exactly. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
So that's really interesting what you just mentioned. And also one thought came up to me after you were speaking about what beauty means to you. So if we take a look at the composition of our societies now, people have different backgrounds, different possessions, we have different cultures here. Do you have any thoughts on how we choose who is going up to Mars, and how we ensure to represent the beauty of the whole humanity up there, so that we can leave racism and things like that behind us?
Well, first of all, the people who go to Mars are going to choose themselves. I imagine there could be a colony created involuntarily, but I don't think it's likely to be terribly successful. I think it has to be created by people who want to go and who do, and it will be their visions that get put to the test. I think, one of the things that I am most proud about the United States, and it doesn't always live up to this ideal, it is true, but to a fair extent anyway, it has, is this idea that anyone can become an American. Okay. And so people come here, and if you look at the different waves of immigrants that have come to the United States, okay, first the English, then the Scots, then the Irish, then the Germans, and the Swedes, and the Jews, and the Italians, and the Poles, and different waves of people. And in general, each one, when they were new, encountered a certain amount of prejudice, because they were different. But almost all of them, including even now from Asia, managed to find a place and a way. And America has benefited tremendously from this expansion of talent from different peoples from around the world. I think it's our greatest strength. And one of the things that even conservatives have criticized Trump for is his anti-immigrant bias, as being not constructive, just not in the interest of America to exclude immigrants, and not only the most, including all kinds of immigrants. And because it's that talent that has really done a great deal to build our country and give it its dynamic nature. And so to the extent that. Okay, and once again, this hasn't been perfect, and I'm not trying to you know, but to the extent that that has functioned, okay, that is a success principle. Okay, and inclusivity, if you will. So I think the most successful Mars colonies are going to be inclusive. They're going to welcome talent. In other words, I think there's a universal principle there. And I think it will demonstrate itself. And I think those that reject talent, that is a disabling feature. So I tend to think that the most successful societies are those that allow the greatest realization and utilization of the human potential of their people. And you know, and I think this will be proven again. So there is these principles are not just moral principles, they are practical principles of development. And societies that reject them have paid a price. You know, suppressed talent, it goes elsewhere. Okay, and if it doesn't go elsewhere, you still don't get its benefits yourself because you've suppressed it. So, you know, but I think what we're going to see on Mars is a lot of social experiments. I mean, they might not think of themselves as experiments, but they are experiments. All experience is experiment. And I think having a place to go where the rules haven't been written yet gives greater opportunity for experimentation, and therefore progress.
Mm-hmm. But do you think we'll end up by only having like scientists up there?
Oh, no,
okay.
Absolutely not. No. I mean, on the first human mission to Mars, probably half the crew will be scientists because the job at hand is scientific exploration. The other half will be engineers, including very practical engineers and mechanics, people who can fix things. Okay, that will dominate the first mission to Mars. But if you're talking about a society on Mars, it will need, you know, not only those kinds of people, it'll need doctors, nurses, teachers, and people who can lead community orchestras. And all of that. That's what goes into making a society. Yesterday, or actually not yet, last week, I was asked by someone in a Zoom talk, you know, you have 2 dogs. Will there be dogs on Mars? And I said, of course there'll be dogs on Mars. Okay, they're part of our culture. Okay, there'll be dogs on Mars for the same reason there'll be community theater on Mars. Because human society goes beyond the merely practical.
Thank you very much.
So I will have the next question. It's also society related. You already spoke a bit about it, but I was just wondering, since we're creating these conditions to colonize Mars, we're also speaking about an evolution of the human species, about the evolution of the society, because we need to adapt to new conditions. And you already mentioned that you think that the new society will be more inclusive. But I was just wondering if there are some specific visions about how to create a model of society which will be functional, because I think it's also important to have maybe some specific rules And are there any opinions how much will this future society on Mars differ from the society we currently have on Earth regarding the new challenges we will face?
Well, sure, there's a multitude of ideas. Now, a lot of these ideas, I mean, look, these ideas right now are drawn from us. And if you know, for instance, in the Mars City State competition, many of the ideas of most of those societies tended to be sort of social democratic. There were a couple that were libertarian in orientation. And I guess these are two different strands of idealism that are current. And it's quite possible, though, that the actual people who found a Mars colony will have additional motivations, including, for instance, religious motivations. If you look at some of the most remarkable colonization efforts over the past 400 years, they've had that quality to them. I refer to, say, the Pilgrims who came to Massachusetts, the Mormons who went to Utah, the Jews that went to Palestine. These are all counterintuitive efforts, because in all cases, there were other places where they could go that were easier. You know, the Mormons going to Utah, they could have gone to California. It's a lot nicer. Jews could have gone to New York. I mean, the Pilgrims went to Massachusetts. They were in Holland, and their problem was the Dutch were being too nice. They were being assimilated. They wanted to go someplace that they wouldn't have that. They wanted to have their own world. But because they all three of those had this sort of transcendent idea of creating their own place, their own city on a hill, as it were. It gave them a lot of resolve, ability to overcome adversity, and overcome great difficulties. So there's that. You know, one idea of a Mars colony is a commercial effort, where the hope of the investors would be that the Mars colonists, being a group of very technically skilled people in a frontier environment, which is going to force them to innovate, would come up with a lot of inventions that would not just benefit them, but could be licensed on Earth. That's an interesting idea, and it could even work, particularly if the Mars colonists are recruited from people who, how can I put it, believe that it is important to the human future that humans expand into space. In other words, okay, so that's not a formal religion in the sense that some of the other religions that I just named are, but it is a faith, okay? It is a faith that people are willing to risk life and treasure to realize. It is a faith beyond, well, I'd like to have a comfortable and safe life. If your goal is to simply have a comfortable and safe life, I don't think you're going to Mars. Unless you're a refugee and you're trying to flee from oppression. I guess that's possible too. I mean, you know, without getting too specific, there's a lot of places I could look at around the world today that 10 years from now could be producing floods of refugees because they're living next to dangerous neighbors. And things can go wrong. So that's another reason why some people might start a Mars colony. But I think that however it starts, once it starts, it's going to take on a life of its own. You know, the people can start a colony for the profit of some corporation back on Earth. But once they're there, at a certain point, they are not going to be living for the company. They're going to be living for themselves. Okay. I mean, perhaps the issue of children will precipitate the split, because having children is a very human desire, which the colonists will want to have, but if there's a corporation backing them, they're overhead. Okay. But whatever it is, at a certain point, you know, life makes its own way. That's the best answer I can give you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Hello. I was thinking of the thing you mentioned at the beginning, that space could be the next traveling area for mass traveling within 1 hour. Do you think that this could be the next possibility of traveling ecological and sustainable? Because the traveling by train in this moment isn't the best way, we know. But could this be better? Because the space traveling for me is the big energy emissions.
Well, you have to look. You're not going to want to, you know, travel from, you know, Frankfurt to Berlin in a spaceship. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, but to go from Hamburg to Australia, okay, it's for those sorts of trips that it makes sense. So global destinations as opposed to local destinations.
But doesn't the speed you need to leave the atmosphere need so much more energy than a regular plane would need for the whole travel to Australia, for example?
It depends. For short distances, you're right. For long distances, in other words, when you take an aircraft and you travel halfway around the world, okay, it uses a lot of energy, because what you're doing, I could work through the equations for you, but the airplane has to keep itself aloft. So it has to generate lift equal to its weight. Okay. It has to keep going forward, it has to exert thrust equal to its drag. And that thrust times speed is power. Power times time is energy. And if you work through all these numbers, you find that traveling intercontinental distances by airplane starts using similar energies to intercontinental flight by rocket. The short distance is much better. Okay. You know, okay, so for Frankfurt to Berlin, take a train. For Berlin to Paris, take a plane. Okay, but for Hamburg to Sydney, take a rocket. You know, the different distances have their most appropriate mode of transportation.
So these sort of airports would look totally another way we know airports at the actual moment, but will it need also more space?
Yeah, probably. I think it would probably have to, at least as I envision it, that you would put the spaceports 20 kilometers out to sea. Platforms there. So you'd fly there from a coastal city on an airplane, and the takeoff would be there. Because, yeah, sure, they'll generate a lot of noise.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Katja, are you here?
Yes.
Yeah, it was you. Okay, so I think this was the last question that we have. Is there any other question? Otherwise, we have 4 minutes left. I would like to thank Robert Zubrin for his talk and inspirational thoughts, really, for humans on Earth and for Mars. Looking forward to see you again at another Mars Society conference. Do you know where it is? The next
Well,
year?
my guess is that, well, if it's a live conference, the next American conference will probably be in California, and the next European conference is probably going to be in Spain, in Madrid. But depending upon how COVID goes, we might do another teleconvention, as we did this year, which proved very successful. And one thing about it is it's the most international conference we've ever had, because you didn't have this enormous, you might say, prejudice in terms of who could attend. I mean, in the sense of it would be very expensive to go to a conference on another continent if you go in person, whereas for a teleconvention, it was the same for everyone.
Okay, this sounds great. Thank you again, Robert.
You're welcome. And so listen, if it is a teleconvention, and I should also say the teleconvention was cheap enough that we were able to make it free for everyone. Perhaps some of your students might want to present their designs for Mars habitats and Mars cities.
This would be a lovely opportunity. We are preparing a booklet, and it's really at the printing agency at the moment, late, but it is there. I will send you one of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert Zubrin, and have a good day.
All right.
Thank you all. See you
Okay.
soon.
All right. Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen. Bye.